Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for The Bad Batch Season 1, Episode 16, Finale Part 2. And the main word I think I would use to describe this episode was underwhelming. Disappointment was definitely the main emotion reaction from me finishing this. It just, I don't think, did anything that was particularly incredible, worthy of a final episode. I don't think it really did all that. I think part of it is that I think we'd be having a slightly different conversation if they had actually aired the two parts of the finale together last week. That way, I think the first part of the finale would have been just about strong enough to, I think, hold up and connect the dots to the second part, to where the second part, not really having a lot going on, wouldn't have mattered as much. Still would have been a discussion point, but the fact that they left it a week and effectively all we got was sort of an escape sequence and very basic setups for season 2, none of which are like hugely exciting because they didn't do a lot in this episode to give you any of the dynamic really to work with, because the majority of this episode was just the Bad Batch escaping from the rubble of Tipoca City, the fall of Kamino, basically. And look, there was some really nice animation. Lots of water here, which is usually very complicated, I believe, to do in CG, and it all looked, I thought, pretty good. There's a lot to deal with here in terms of, like, you know, water flowing into this area, and then it's full in this area, and then you have, they're inside a tube, but it's water on the outside, the water starts to come in. A lot of complicated scenes, and so from that point of view, there was a certain spectacle to it all. The usual Bad Batch sort of thing of just there's pretty good action going on, but the other Bad Batch thing of there's not a lot of stakes to this action because none of these characters feel developed enough, and they usually don't have that strong of a dynamic going on where you're really worried, because they're not going to kill off the entire Bad Batch. They're just not. And in the grand scheme of where they were going with this episode, they weren't going to kill off any of the important characters in this sequence, which is basically like Hunter, Crosshairs, and Omega. Omega they weren't going to kill because they didn't end up really doing anything significant with her really in the finale, so it was really obvious they weren't going to kill her. When they had the slight discussion with Crosshairs and he still devoted himself to the Empire, it was clear we're not done with Crosshairs, they're not going to kill him. And in a way, because of that, you're also not going to kill off Hunter, because there was maybe an expectation that what they might have done here is focus the episode a little bit more on action between Crosshairs and Hunter, of them saving each other in some way, but instead they went with Omega and Crosshairs sort of saving each other, which I didn't feel was like as super strong. What it meant is that a lot of this sort of is just on hold now until season 2, when they decide whatever they're doing with Crosshairs, how the team works now that they sort of nearly got him back, but he's on the other side. I think the biggest disappointment probably is that they gave no further explanation about the whole Crosshairs not having his inhibitor chip thing. Because the way they talked about it here was that he never had an inhibitor chip or something like that. That his inhibitor chip was taken away way before we thought. Because I think everyone had settled on the idea that I think, oh, the chip has been gone since his injury. But then Omega's kind of like, oh no, your decision making for like the whole time has been due to the inhibitor chip? Or was it meant to just be that his decision making here in the now? He doesn't have his inhibitor chip anymore, so his personality now doesn't come at all from the inhibitor chip. It's just this is what he believes. They at least committed to that. And they gave, in my mind, Tech probably his best, like, character moment of the whole series, which is him showing that, in a way, on the whole team, he is probably the one who understands Crosshair the most, in that, like, Wreckers kind of tries to sort of turn the tables on Crosshairs of, like, you could have come to us at any time, but Tech is the one who comes in and is like, understand like he's always been like this, even when he was properly part of the team. Like this is always his general personality. So that was something for Tech, because he's probably the character who's been the most like one note of all in the whole team. Echo, of course, they just haven't done anything with, apart from like one nice moment, like an episode or two ago. They haven't really done all that much. Um, and yeah, like again, I could talk about the specifics of each of the action sequences, but a lot of it was just sort of they're in the tubes, they're going up. AZ gets a pretty big action set piece moment where like he has to be the one to make sure that the pods, it was kind of clever, the idea that the way they escape from being on the bottom of the ocean and go up is that they find a sort of safe area in the Nala Se's lab, so they have to use the pods that they were sort of grown in a way to go up to the surface. So there's a sort of significance to that. And AZ just has to kind of guide them through the rubble. So it's a lot of work for one droid to do, to guide, like, what was it, 4 pods up through it. And it works, but he's running out of power. And they basically do a full-on death setup for AZ. And you think, like, oh, this is going to be the death of AZ. But then Omega gets out and goes back for him. And then Crosshairs has his big moment that shows that he's not completely on the Empire side of things, or at the very least, he still cares when he uses the sort of grappling sniper rifle thing to bring AZ and Omega up to the surface to sort of return the favor because she saved Crosshairs earlier on in the episode. The actual sort of end sequence, the sort of cliffhanger ending, if you can even call it that, it was so like, okay, I understand this, I got this from the scene that you said earlier on. If you weren't going to show us anything significant in this moment, you didn't even need to have this scene. Because it's just Nala Se brought to this Empire facility, and a scientist comes out and says, we're happy to have your expertise here. And it's like, okay, like they said in the previous episode, or the one before that, the Kaminoans are going to be used if they have scientific expertise, but they don't have any use for the politicians. That makes complete sense. And this was just like, yeah, you told us this already. Okay, we get to see sort of the facility, I guess, with the idea that we're probably going to have scenes here in the next season. And I guess you're showing us the location a bit beforehand. That's something. But again, character-wise, plot-wise, reveal-wise, they weren't doing anything here. No particular tease of like, this is the Force sensitivity cloning type thing. All you needed to do was just give us a hint of that. And even though we roughly know that's what it's going to be, the show didn't actually surface that, really. So that's a bit of a problem. Other than that, like I said, they escape. There's a monster attack, of course. Again, they get out of that. And they find their way back to the Marauder. And they just have a bit of a talk here where it's just revealed that Crosshairs is not going to go with the Bad Batch. So they are forced to kind of go off on their own. They say their final sort of goodbyes to Kamino. The whole city is gone. Again, this is where the other part of this is that I felt that this episode was really relying on you, again, feeling the emotion of the loss of Kamino. But we'd already sort of went through that last episode, because the big moment was opening fire and seeing it sort of begin to collapse. And there that we had a whole week to sort of accept that this was just like, okay, let's get to the plot in a way. So that's another sort of part of the mistake of it probably should have been aired together. Given that, they aired an triple length episode to start the season, could you really not have done the double length episode to end the season? I think it would have just helped the flow overall. So I think that's pretty much everything that I want to say. You do sort of wonder, like, okay, what is Crosshairs going to do? Because like the Empire left, they've now left, and it doesn't look like there's anything for him to do to get off world. So is he just stuck there? They should have just, I think, committed to just a little bit more of like, okay, what's Crosshairs up to? Are they going to commit to the idea of he finds his way back to the Empire, but they don't have a use for him anymore? Because the big scene, I suppose, is when confronted, Crosshairs basically says that he supports the Empire, similar to what he said in the last episode. They're going to sort of control the entire galaxy, and sort of he wants to be a part of that. But Hunter just says that, like, understand that they don't care about you. To them, you're just a number. Like, you're still a clone. Then they only will consider you as a clone. That Crosshairs, in a way, hasn't connected the idea of, look how disposable the facility that we're from is. They've already begun to replace the regular clones with enlisted recruits, and they only really care about the commander clones. But they only care about the commander clones to train up the new recruits. So Hunter's kind of seeing the bigger picture and is talking about how free they are, that he made a decision for his team, and that Crosshairs needs to make a decision that's kind of more realistic, I suppose. So again, I feel like this arc is kind of interesting, but they way overly extended it across this season in terms of, like, there were entire chunks of episodes this season, huge parts of the season, where Crosshairs wasn't even in it. So we just didn't really get a sense for what's going on. And now they sort of rushed the whole, well, my inhibitor chip's been gone for a long time, this is how I actually feel, and I'm immediately making a decision here, and I'm not going to explain a lot about it. And it's like, okay, that makes you interesting, but you need to do a little bit more to get me over the line on this. And it's just, that's been this season. None of the arcs feel like particularly amazing. Like I said, half of the main cast are pretty one-note characters, or characters who they haven't really done anything with. Echo's like a character who we actually sort of care about because he had better episodes in the Clone Wars, but as part of the Bad Batch, he's just sort of been there. Tech is just Tech. He had his one kind of nice piece of dialogue here, but otherwise is just literally the tech guy in the team. Wrecker had his moment, but otherwise is just the brawn of the team. The whole Hunter Omega dynamic, I think they tried, and it's worked to a certain degree, but it felt like they ran out of steam on that dynamic a few episodes ago, and they haven't really had anything extra to do with it of late. And that's why I feel like the fact that basically the Bad Batch are going off, with the only real new addition being they have AZ on their team now, and there's no real clear path for them. I guess they'll have a little bit of freedom going into next season because everyone's going to think that they're dead. And I'm guessing they'll make a plot point out of if Crosshairs goes back to the Empire, does he tell the Empire that the Bad Batch survived or not? I'm guessing they'll have it that he keeps it a secret. And so we'll get a few episodes at the start of next season where the Bad Batch are more free to do what they want. They won't be constantly pursued. Makes me wonder, like, what's the status of, like, the bounty hunters? Are they still going after Omega or not? Or because I doubt the Kaminoans have had a chance to sort of cancel the bounty, so we'll see how that all plays out. And it's just that sense of, like, okay, what is the setup? Because in a way, this show has been kind of weak, just sort of doing we're traveling to this planet to do this, and then we're going here to do this. And it's been very reliant on cameos. Is that just going to be what next season is? There has to be a better hook for that cast. Because again, this entire season I felt was about, ultimately, finding our way back to Crosshairs and maybe convincing him to join us. But now they've committed to, no, we're not quite ready for that. So is that just going to be the second season all over again? The same thing? And maybe Crosshairs will join us in season 2? It's not the strongest multi-season arc, I don't think. And while Crosshairs is a little bit more interesting now, it feels like for season 2, you probably need to have the confidence in this show to have the focus not be on the Bad Batch. And I know some people will not like that because, say, that the Hera episodes, even though I felt they were actually probably 2 of the strongest episodes of the season, some people don't like them because they weren't Bad Batch focused. But from my perspective, I'm like, it worked out in their favor that it wasn't Bad Batch focused because Hera is a stronger character than basically every member of the Bad Batch. And this is the era that we're in, we're going to have to do some connective tissue kind of building kind of moments here. And in that sense, I feel, yeah, have a few episodes that focus on like what Rex is doing behind the scenes. Like, it feels like it's beginning to become a little bit of a detriment to the show that it is called The Bad Batch and has to be laser focused on them, when it'd be better just being the post Clone Wars show where you can have arcs with the Bad Batch. They can be our sort of core that we come back to every so often. But we can have episodes with Rex. We can have episodes with other clones, like we've already done Gregor. We can go to Wolf if we need to. That's what I think they need to do, and I ultimately think, again, Season 2 is probably still going to be, like this season, sort of reliant on a lot of cameos for next season, because they still, I don't know if I have the confidence in this show to make me care that much about the Bad Batch, in that I don't think any of the characters are on the level of, an Ahsoka or even a Rex. And they need to work on that. They definitely need to work on that to build up and make it work. So, yeah, that's the episode. It was just fine. Like, it was probably like maybe a 7 at most, and I think that's even being exceptionally generous. It's just like, I find it so difficult to really place like just how good in a way Season 1 of The Bad Batch was, because there were episodes that were really, really weak, like that one a few episodes ago that was randomly focused on like Sid, and earlier on in the season, again, we had a similar one to that. But then there have been stronger episodes, kind of like the Wrecker Chip episode, like the opener, and so on. But it's just been so scattered, and it's highlighted that, again, when they do stuff with the characters, it can be good, but they don't seem to have many ideas for the characters. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this final episode of Season 1 of The Bad Batch. What are your thoughts on, I suppose, this season now that it's come to an end? Where do you think Season 2 is going to go? What's going to make Season 2 feel more unique? I think the next sort of visual sort of Star Wars thing, I think, is Star Wars Visions, which I think is only a few weeks away, so that's going to be cool. I wonder how they're going to release it, though. I do plan to do some videos on that. If it is a weekly thing, I might not do weekly reviews of it, but it depends on what exactly they're like. Still, anime Star Wars sounds pretty amazing to me, so expect that, and then reviews of other High Republic stuff that will be coming out. So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.